2 years, 3 years? I don't know. 2 years. And because it's not for a day job, it's like get together at whatever time is left. So
this is like that 20% time, right? This. When you say this. What is this meeting?
This is kind of what we call the Windows installer, the Wix virtual team. Okay. So this group of guys that have been here for, I don't know, like I said, 2, 3, some of them 4 years working on this tool set to do what it does, and basically keep it going and keeping the core of the community going. There's also a couple of guys that aren't here. One of them is in London and another one in Europe, just kind of Southern Europe, I forget where, wherever Gabor is at. Those guys are real active as well. But these guys have been on the project for a long time, even before we went open source externally.
Right. Now, what is your day job?
My day job?
Yeah.
I'm a software design engineer on the Windows Component Platform, which is the installation platform for the operating system itself, including patches and all the optional components like Internet Information Server, MSMQ, Hearts, Reversi, all those kinds of things. The platform underneath that installs those. That's my day job.
Yep.
We all have different ones.
So everybody's from different teams here?
Yeah.
Why don't we just go around and just say hi and introduce yourself?
Hi, Scott Kurtzborn. I work in Office. My role, I'm a setup developer in Office. My role on the Wix team has been to maintain the custom action code, and that's fallen off as of late, but my contribution should be coming back up shortly.
Cool.
I'm Bob Arnson. I'm a writer for the Visual Studio SDK. Pretty much lately I've been working on UI components in Wix.
Okay.
So,
Cool.
Hey, I'm Aaron Stubner. My day job, I'm a program manager on the Windows Media Center team.
Good.
I've been trying to find my role here, doing a little bit of everything. I'm hoping to tie my day job in Media Center to something here to make it easier for Media Center devs to write setup packages for their add-ins and stuff like that. But I got to do a little more investigation and see what comes from that.
Excellent. David?
I'm Derek Cicerone. I used to work with Scott and Rob on the Office team. Lately I'm working on Xbox Extender, which is the Media Center thing.
Yep.
And
So you work on the Xbox team?
yeah, well, no, I work on the Media Center team, but we program on the Xbox.
Got it.
And for Wix, I work on 3.0 and anything else they need me to.
Got it. Now let me get over here. Yeah.
I'm Reed Guston. I'm a developer over in Windows Server on Wix. Lately, I'm sort of a generalist. I sort of float around and do what I can, or not much, depending on the night. So,
Excellent.
yeah.
Oh,
And
cool.
we've got a couple more guys showing up late.
Okay.
Sure,
was
whatever
late
it's
too. So what is Wix? Just give me a 2-minute pitch and then maybe show us it.
So the Windows installer is the installation platform for applications. And you have to create these things called MSI files, which are what you double-click on and then launch, the installation process.
Right.
So anytime you install Office or, any app really, from Microsoft, for example, what Wix does is a compiler and a linker, just like source code, in C++, you have compiler and linker that generate executables. We generate the MSI packages. So we do a lot of the work to fit really tightly or smoothly into a build process, such that you, at the end of your build process, instead of just producing executables, which are good, you actually produce a MSI package, which is actually the thing that takes all of your graphics you may have, any other DLLs, all the stuff together, so that you can then put it on a CD, put it on a web, however you distribute it to your users. They can then double-click on that, and boom, get the installation.
Interesting.
So that's the final product, right? Because users don't get an XE. Sometimes the XE is all you need.
Yeah.
But for applications that are more complicated, you need something that places it on the machine.
Yeah.
And the Wix Toolset uses an XML language that runs through a compiler and a linker and creates those packages.
Right.
And we have a huge demo that I can walk you through to show you how it all works.
Cool. We'll see that in a minute.
Yep.
I heard it. So it's one of the few open source projects here.
It was
at
the
Microsoft.
first one.
It was the first one.
Yes.
And tell me about that. And is that why you guys have to meet here at night?
Cursives.
Do you move offices every meeting?
Not every year. Every 3 years?
The open source underground at Microsoft. Yeah, that's.
So these types of tools, there's nothing inside Microsoft necessarily that builds an industrial strength tools for the entire company.
Right.
So it's always kind of been one of the things like, all right, need to solve a problem. Back in the day, I was in the Office setup team building the packages for the Office, I guess it was XP back then. And so on the side, I was working on this tool that embodied kind of what I thought the best way to build these packages was. And there are a lot of ideas floating around about how to treat setup code like source code, how to integrate it, and then how to distribute it across all your developers. Because a lot of times you get this narrow set of people, like 5 or 8 people that work on it. When you think of something the size of Office, that's a lot of data coming to like only a few people. Yep. So it's how to get that distributed. So those ideas are where it started. And then I wanted to learn XML because back in 1999 when it started, XML wasn't big yet, right? We're still debating between whether XDR or Microsoft XML data reduced or whatever was going to be this way schemas were defined. Right, because that's how the first schema in Wix was. We had XSD and all those kind of things. So I took Windows Installer and then XML, kind of merged them together, and you get this tools that embodies the philosophy of building setup inside your build process that all developers can use.
Interesting.
So that's how it started.
How many teams use the technology you guys are building?
The grand majority of Microsoft.
So almost every time I install something on my computer, it's using your guys' code?
The next version of pretty much all the things. For example, Visual Studio's in the conversion from their custom process before to Wix right now. SQL Server 2005 that shipped now actually shipped on Wix v1. Office, the next version of Office is shipping with Wix, the next version. We had to get to a point about, I guess, end of 2004, where we got to the point where we could scale to all of their needs. And a lot of teams are migrating to Wix now because of how it fits into the build process. So if you go to teams, they'll say, oh, I'm on such and such a tool right now. In fact, I had one guy come to me and said, so we're using this one tool, and I went and talked to all the people at Microsoft that are using it. And they're all like, yeah, we're using it right now, but we're actually switching to Wix the next time. So it's like, oh, all right, well that gets pretty much it. So all the P&Ls, you name it, from mobile to servers to MSN. I mean, MSN, a lot of the back-end data center stuff, their packages are built with Wix Toolset.
So why do you guys have to meet here at night? I mean, it would seem like you would have an office right next to Bill for something so important and be working on this all day long, right?
It's always been... I guess
people outside of Microsoft don't understand why you would have to meet at night to do something so important.
It's always been that way. It's never been a full-time job. It's never been anything that we had to set a set of people on it at a day job. From the beginning, Wix has always been, you get the source code. I mean, the first version of Wix, we talk about Wix v2 and Wix v3 right now, the first version of Wix was written in VB script. I mean, it grew into like 10,000 lines of VB script. So even from the beginning, you got the source code. And that was a lot of it. It's like, here, if you want to be a part of it, work with the code back and forth. Back then, in 1999, open source wasn't a thing you threw around inside Microsoft a lot, so we call it a lot more community source. Right? It's like build a community around a block of code that solves a bunch of people's problems.
Right.
So what you see, these group of guys, right, have been here that all jumped on at various times and said, this is a thing that's important, it's cool, it's fun, whatever, and now work on continuing to make it that. We haven't needed a full-time job to make it go because we're all just very driven to make it the best tool possible. We can do our day jobs and still get along at Tuesday nights and make progress on this kind of stuff.
So how often do you meet a month?
4 times a month.
Every Tuesday.
Once a week.
Yeah.
Once a week.
But a lot of people work on it outside of that time frame too.
Sure. Yeah. Sure.
Yeah.
Depending on how things go.
Who funds the pizza?
We do.
Well, who's
You're
we?
chipping in.
Okay. Wait a second. I got a corporate card. Does this pizza guy take American Express?
I don't know. You should do Papa John's. So you want to do that?
I represent the second time Microsoft pays for the pizza.
It doesn't get comped.
I'll work for free, but I have to have pizza.
That would in fact double the total funding for Wix we've gotten out of Mensching.
Yeah, actually.
Interesting. So what does it do?
You want to see it?
Yeah.
All right, so you want to go from start to finish. It's, like I said, it's a nice long demo, but I think it really embodies how
If I start falling asleep, I'll interrupt you.
Well, and really, like I said,
Hold on a second. Let me just set up.
the biggest challenge is making sure that I don't go too fast or skip over details that are otherwise interesting. Or if I start digging on some detail you don't care about, just go, yeah, nobody cares, and we'll go on.
Well, I don't know that. They'll tell me.
So the way this works is that we've kind of set up a system where there are multiple developers working on a particular project.
Right.
And this is a fictional project that we'll get into. So Reed will go ahead and check in the first thing, and I'll show how we sync it. Now what you're seeing here is actually a lot of the Microsoft build process stuff that we use. So
Okay.
we have a mock-up of the Office build process, so you can actually see a little bit of how Office does some of the things, and also some of the tools that we use to sync. But it's the same anywhere. You could be using Subversion, CVS, Visual Source Safe, whatever you want to use externally. And I'm a very command line driven guy, so you're going to see a lot of the command line driven stuff here. But I'll drop in the Visual Studio for command line completion, or IntelliSense, which you'll see in a little
IntelliSense,
bit. So are we good to go, Reed?
First one's in.
All right, so first thing I'm going to do is sync. So this is our demo source project, and the first thing we're going to see is, if I have a network connection, all this stuff that comes in the first time.
So what is that we're...
So I'm going to take it apart. Hey, Reed,
Okay.
what's the change list on that?
It is, 6115.
6115. I'll be pulling those throughout. So this is actually a diff tool that Derek wrote for us for a while ago that shows the changes that were made to the project. At the moment, they're all yellow, so it's all new files.
Got it.
It's a lot like if you'll see a WinDiff externally. You can get WinDiff externally. This is like that, except it's a lot prettier.
Okay.
So what we're creating is a fruit server. I can actually tell you this. We started as a GUID server, but people tend to get, there's a lot of GUIDs floating around inside the Windows installer, which are globally unique identifiers.
Yep.
So we backed up and said, all right, we'll make something really goofy, so then it doesn't get confusing what's a GUID and what's not. All right. So what this is, and I'm going to start at COM. So it's everybody talks C# and all the VB and all that kind of stuff. We're going to start at COM and work our way to more modern things, maybe, I guess to put it. So this is an IDLE file, and as you can
So
see...
you'll lose me, and maybe I'll catch up.
Sure. I'm just going to lay out the big things so we can see where they come back together later and how it all fits back together.
Okay.
What this is laying out is the IDLE file. So we're going to create a service on the machine that serves out servers, or a fruit from a server.
Okay.
So you're going to be able to create a COM call and say, give me a fruit. And it will give you back a fruit. And then you can make another COM and give me a fruit. And that's all it's going to do. So you can see here is a get. And we're going to get out a string. And you can see all this stuff. This is all this lovely COM goo that you get in all COM servers.
Yep.
All right. So then we go down.
Sorry, my camera. There you go.
No problem. And so actually, why don't I open this up in Visual Studio? Client in the fruit server. And client, FS client.
Okay.
So this is the code that would be just as a typical client. I'm just going to walk through to show that it's really just COM. So co-initialize, co-create instance on our class ID for the fruit server.
Let me just get...
However you want to do that.
Yeah.
So you're going to start floating. Oh boy. It's going to be. So co-create, co-initialize, and then co-create instance, typical thing. We'll get our pointer back to the server interface, and then we'll do a get, and we'll get the fruit, and then we'll print it out.
Cool.
And if there's any problems, we'll print out an error message. So here you go. Typical COM client, not the server. So if we look at the server, we'll get to the server later. So I'm going to build the client first. So that's just enough to build a client. Of course, without a server, it's not going to work, but
Okay.
we'll see it. The other thing is, in the setup directory, we have our first WXS file. And here we go. All right. So at the top is Wix. This is just our container idea, right? Then all MSI packages are called products. So this is the thing that you install. You can think like Office as a product or MSN Messenger as a product.
Right.
All those different things. So a product, a unique identifier, some information about it. This is our fruit server package. All right. Then there's some more Windows installer specific things about the package and how this would get identified and things like that. Again, you can see fruit server and stuff like that. Then here you're going to see the media is going to be laid out as a cab.
Okay.
So we're going to compress all the files into a single cabinet file, and then we're going to embed that cabinet inside the MSI. So in the end, we're going to end up with one single MSI file that you can double-click on and install. And a lot of people like to distribute it that way. A whole bunch, because you can also lay it as multiple cabs outside and distribute it that way as well. And then I have a directory structure laid out where I'm basically going to install the program files folder into the fruit server directory.
Got it.
So you'll see me jump over there. And then down here, we have the feature. Now the way the Windows installer is laid out is that you have a product, and then you have features inside that product that are the user configurable things. You can turn them on and off. So you could think like inside Office, you could turn on Word, Excel independently. You could turn on and off like the spell checker and all those kind of things. So this is my feature here. So now if we actually write a little bit of Wix, so I don't have the setup here that actually talks about the file I'm going to install.
Okay.
So we have to add that. So first thing I do is sd edit setup fs.ws. Check it out of the depot. This is the way it works. So I'm going to make changes to this so that I can work with the rest of the guys that are on this team. So now that I have it, I can edit it. The Windows installer breaks out products, features as the selectable things, and then you break up your individual product into components. Those are the smallest parts of install of the installation. They're not a user concept, they're a developer concept. So I'm going to create product components all over the place, and we're going to see how they get grouped together later. And it's always going to come back and get nested underneath my feature.
Okay.
All right, so I have to create a component for my client. So here's component. I gave it an ID, just a unique identifier. Notice how I'm typing very little.
Yep.
This is IntelliSense inside Visual Studio. Cuts down on the typing a lot. So FS client, I'll just call it that. Now all MSI or all components have a GUID, so they can be identified. So you can get a hold of them later to turn them on and off, programmatically access them, patch them, all those kinds of things. So I'm going to give it a GUID. So hit equals. I have a macro built into Visual Studio for me to automatically give me a GUID. So the little macro runs in the background. It should drop me a GUID right there. So great. Now I go, and then I have to say this GUID or this component is going to get stuck on this media. So I'm going to put it on disk 1. That way everything inside this component will be inside my cabinet.
Okay.
All right. So there. Now I have a component. Now I can put things inside a component, like my file. So we do that next. So inside the component, and again, Visual Studio is completing a lot for me, I add a file. And you can see all these different kinds of things that I can do inside here. In this case, I'm installing a file. ID equals, I don't know, fs client.exe. Doesn't matter that much. We have to name the file. So this is just a global identifier, so we'll call it, this is actually the name of the exe that we're going to build as part of our build process. And then I specify where it comes from in the build.
Okay.
So the way that, your build process, you're going to build it Xware. So Wix is the bridge between actually installed on the end user's machine and getting it out of your build system and putting it on the machine. So the source tag, and there's a lot of different source tags, where it will go find the file wherever it is out of your build process and pull it into the MSI.
Okay.
So the way that I'm doing that, I have a variable that I set from my build system called demodir, which is where I build everything, and the exe that I build out of the system is called fsclient.exe, and I'm done there. The next thing to do is to make sure that this component is part of a feature. All components need to be a part of a feature, otherwise they're not going to get installed, which means they're not going to do us any good, and I just have to make it match these two things here. So fsclient, here's this name of the component, this is a reference to that component.
Right.
What we're going to see later is it's going to get more complicated in how these references will tie separate files together when read gives me another thing.
Okay.
I'm not going to type this much from now on. I'm just going to have it all auto-generated because
No problem.
it gets boring.
First of all, where do I get Wix?
Here, I'll just type it. We'll put it in http://wix.sourceforge.net. That's
So
where
it's
you
like
get it.
SourceForge.
SourceForge. Yep.
And where do I learn about all the constructs you're doing, the product?
We have a chum. Also at that URL, whack tutorial, you'll get a redirect off of to, I think if you were to print it out, like a 60-page, 70-page document that basically walks you through this kind of stuff step by step that an external developer wrote for us. And I'll come back to what Gabor has also done for us later. So you can get there. There's also a wix.chum checked in as a reference.
Okay.
And I don't know if you've noticed, but as I type, let's see, like short name, you see you're going to get these hints here. Those come from the same thing that's in the documentation as well. So you
Got
can
it.
kind of learn as you go.
Excellent.
Inside here.
You should do a pointer to your blog and then put all these links up there,
And then
so that they don't have to scramble and copy through.
Well, we can also put it on the Channel 9 video underneath the video.
Yeah, that'd be a good place to put it.
so there's also my blog where I talk about Windows installer, Wix, all those kinds of things.
So if somebody gets really confused, they can.
You can go there and and then you can always leave a comment,
All right.
and you can follow the history as we build along as well. All right,
Excellent.
so we're good. This should build now.
Yeah.
All right, so save that file, and like I said, we use the old build process, so we'll close that guy. And now we'll build. Going along, we're compiling the IDL file, we're going to build the C files, create this FS client, and at the end you're going to see it build the setup directory right here, which built our WXS file, get the DLL, and then it'll all get linked in together into a single MSI package.
Okay.
Have you ever seen inside an MSI package?
Nope.
All right, let's look inside an MSI package.
Orca. Really cool app.
One really cool app is what we call Orca.
Okay.
One really cool app. It's a MSI editor that will allow you to see inside the database. Wix generates these MSI databases.
Okay.
And that's the thing that the Windows installer then reads and installs. So you can see the output that we
Now,
generated.
does Orca come with Wix when I download it? or
Orca is
does
part of
something-
the Platform SDK.
Okay.
So if you're a developer, get Platform SDK, you can get Orca from out of there.
Okay.
Setup, let's see, what is it? x86, debug, demo, fs.msi. This was the MSI that was built from exactly that. And if we look inside this thing, you can see, here's our component, FS client with the GUID that I typed in. If you rewind the video, you're probably going to make sure that they match.
Yep.
Here you can see the file, including the funky way that I spelled client with the capital L, right? And then you see how we got the exe. You'll also notice that we fill in the file size, any version, language, attributes, that we pulled that straight out of the MSI. I didn't have to type all that stuff in to Wix. It found your file, it sucked all the information out of it, and then dropped it inside the MSI file.
Interesting.
So it does a lot of work for you. You'll also see our feature here,
Yep.
fruit server, and then you can see my feature component mapping. So there's my feature to my client, which is that component ref that I created.
Okay.
These two guys are tied together. At the moment I only have one feature, so it's not very interesting, but you can see if I had a bunch of different features, I could create a tree and hook these guys all up differently.
Right.
All right, so this is the inside guts, and you'll also notice that we generate a lot of other stuff for you inside. This is the bare minimum that it will take to install this. Here's the file hash for that file, so you can MSI will use this information to say this is exactly the right file on the machine.
Okay.
All of this provided by Wix. This is the bare minimum that we've been able to ascertain to create this thing to install. That's one of the things that we do in Wix is build very, very clean database packages. It's one of the reasons the Windows installer team likes us, because they go, look, there's not a lot of extra junk in here. We just try to make it as clean as possible. It's like
Yep.
nice, not too optimized code inside. You know. All right, so we go to. Oh, got to install. So now,
This is his jacket.
actually, I can just run it.
So who just walked in?
Justin?
Two
Hey.
people, Justin
Justin and
and Robert.
Robert Fleming.
hey, how are you doing?
Why you say all
Habit? It's hiding in the back.
Been ostracized.
All right, so now all I'm going to do is run the MSI. This is going to pop up with the UI that everybody's familiar with. There's the MSI with the little icon. Boom. It's a really small MSI, so it goes fast.
Okay.
Now, I have the fruit server. Inside the fruit server, I have the fsclient.exe. Remember, I said I was going to put it in program files, fruit server, and fsclient's right here. Boom, it's installed.
Yep.
All right. So now, the last thing is, if I run it, I fail to get fruit from server with that error code. So I have a little error tool that I use to tell me what the error code is. And we're going to see that it's going to tell us that the class isn't registered, which basically means we have a client but no server. So the client tried to talk to a server and it couldn't find it.
Yeah.
So the next thing I want to
That's
do,
a cool error tool.
it's really nice to have laying around. So
Is that open on the public or is that an
I don't know
advanced
where it's at. I'd have to look and see if you can get it. I think it's part of the Platform SDK, one of the advanced tools.
Okay.
It just converts error numbers into where you find them in the header files. All right, so
See, I don't live in command line, so you guys are probably
error.exe is a very useful tool to have a lot. You also get like WinError.exe and those kind of things.
Yeah.
All right.
Hold on a second. Sorry, it's calling.
No worries. So, all right, now we're trying to get food organized while everybody's getting this. So hopefully someone will grab their cell phone and call for food. Somebody.
You can take my cell phone.
J-Rock, you want to get it?
Yeah, what are we doing? Just pizza?
The usual, yeah.
All right, I'm over here in.
Excellent. Everybody's in. Hold on a second. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Pizza's getting ordered.
Yes.
Yay.
Pizza's on. All right, so I need to check this in so that Reed can then sync and get his changes continued. So he's going to then work on the service. Because like I said, we're missing the service. That's the next thing to get checked in.
Okay.
So I'll check this in. I don't know. Normally you would put something more descriptive than that, but that will work. All right, Reed.
425.
So you should be able to sync and then pull in the next thing. So Reed's made a whole bunch of changes that I'll then look at in detail. Whenever he gets them all pulled in. So you can go back and forth. The idea here is that, someone here wrote the client, pulled that, kind of work on the setup logic, so I can show you that. But now what's going to happen is each developer that writes each piece of the product writes their block as setup. And I'll show how they all come in together at the same time. And then we'll write another piece and bring it in another piece. So again, the installation is distributed across the people that understand it. And when you see this next one, you'll see why I want the logic distributed to them.
Okay.
So,
Number 6118.
all right. 6118. All right, so this is the changes that Reed made next. So you can see we've added this fs.svc.wxs file. So that's going to be a Wix file that just got added to the rest of the product that's going to get built, as well as the rest of the implementation for the comm server. So if you want to look at that a little bit, I won't spend a lot of detail. We'll look at the actual implementation of the comm thing. So you can see here. Here's the typical, iFruit server, which inherited from IUnknown. So then we have the typical query interface. Whoops. I have to use the scroll bar. All right. Query interface, add ref release, nothing special. The interlocked increment, decrement. And then here's the get method that we saw about getting our fruit. So you can see all we're going to do is do a rand and pull one of these things one of the fruit at random out of the basket, which is just an array of strings.
Okay.
And then send that back to the client,
Okay.
which is that code that we saw in the beginning that said co-create. So none of this is really hard for anybody who's done any C++ programming. So the thing that everybody's always terrified of is, oh man, all the reg keys that I have to write that get all this stuff to hook together. So what we've done in Wix, which is that fs, so in setup, fs, svc, so this is the fruit server service, we can look at the logic. This here creates, well, we'll start at the top. So we're going to put it into the fruit server folder, which is where we were in program files folder, and we're going to create a service folder underneath that. So we'll have an SVC in there. Then we have a component for the service. Here's the service itself, the exe, pulling out of there. Now we have the app ID. Because it's a local server, you have the application, so it's an out-of-process kind of thing. And then you have your class ID here, which shows how other objects will load this app ID and then get the service started.
Okay.
This turns into, 30 reg keys. All of this is strongly typed data here that basically locks you in going, look, context is 1 of 5 values. The threading model is 1 of 3 or 4 values. So you basically get this nice way of doing that. The next thing is we have the service install, because it's actually a service that we're installing on the system. You can see service install. And it's like, all right, here's the name of it. We're going to display this. It's going to be its own process, so it's going to run all by itself. It's not going to be interactive with the desktop. It's only going to start when it's demanded to. It's vital because we want to have it. And then it has normal error control. If something goes wrong, just do the normal failure kind of cases. And then we're going to start and stop it. Stop it both during install and uninstall, and remove it on uninstall. That's it. Real simple. The last thing is the typical proxy stub that again says this is the DLL that gets generated by middle and loaded into the client and into the server that allows comm to communicate between the two guys.
Right.
And this again is just a tightly bound thing that has one interface for iFruit server.
Now, why is installing Windows apps so complex? I mean, a Macintosh, you can just drag a folder over and it supposedly installs for you, right?
Yep.
Can you give me a little bit of the history behind that? It starts some controversy over here, I think.
No. So Robert and I go way back.
Being correct. You're coming.
So we're looking at
I brought up past pain, I think.
well, it is. It's what we're looking at here is COM, right? Which is this uber extensible way of having applications hook into other applications, with the ideal that any component could be swapped out with any other component, and your application can just get all this functionality simply by pulling these things in. And to do that, they use the registry as a database that they can then use to hook things together. And for whatever reason, they chose to document it as, here are all these reg keys that you have to write as a developer. So that just creates this huge amount of pain as a developer, because you sit there and go, well, which one of these do I need? Because they're not tied together. So one of the things that we try to do in Wix is basically, look, this is how you do a class. This is just how you do it.
Yeah.
This will generate a whole bunch of registry keys. All right? So we'll write that. And that's the way. That's for the old extensibility models. You can see them doing work in COM to come up with different ways of finding DLLs, different ways of sharing code. Because sharing ends up becoming the hardest problem, honestly, for setup, is when you get overlap between two things. How do you make sure the right thing happens when you do uninstall, patching, upgrades, and all these other kind of scenarios?
Yeah.
So in a lot of cases, we're carrying over all of the ancient history of all the different ways of doing applications from, this is back used to called OLE. Right,
Yep.
we name it COM. So
Yep.
I'm showing you probably the worst parts of it. Let me get to a later one. I'll show you some more of the cooler ones. And then hopefully we're going to continue to make this easier.
Yeah, but that's a good point. That Microsoft doesn't, obsolete and break old apps,
No.
right? Everything has to still run.
Sometime to our chagrin, but no, I'm sure Raymond would hit me for saying that. But I mean, it really, all of this will continue to work. And what I'm showing is what is often considered some of the hardest stuff to do,
Yeah.
right? Trying to make it easy and trying to make, honestly, the installation robust so that the right thing just always happens.
Yeah.
That's really what we try to do. It's one of our general tenets inside Wix.
I have a feeling that a couple of the guys here want to go back 15 years ago and slap a few people around.
But only if we get to remember what we know now.
Yeah.
See, there's been a lot of learning getting to this point where if you look at a class ID, the version between it is creating new GUIDs, right? It would have been ideal if we could have versioned that class ID so you could say exactly, this is this particular version. There's all these little things that you go back now and you go, look, if I would have looked at this from a setup point of view, this would have been better. There's another piece of history, which is why Robert's swinging his finger at me.
So the key detail there is that when the technologies that setup has to configure were designed,
Just ignore it.
they didn't actually consider the needs of deployment. So the needs of management, the needs of the infrastructure. So a large degree of the problems is that the underlying technologies that MSI has to address has to work around all the other technologies because the architects or developers or the tester who happened to be working on the problem that day didn't consider all of the deployment cases. So that's what he said that is really important is that if we had to go back 15 years, it wouldn't be a setup problem. It would be the underlying architecture that we had to go inform everybody about.
Yeah. And so another thing, like I said in the beginning, it's really important to get this into the build process because historically, setup has been this thing that you get the newest guy hired or the guy that got his feature done or the intern that basically says, here's all the stuff we built, put this on the machine. So the thing that happens then, and that's been kind of the continuum for a long time. When you get that, it's like, all right, so this is the guy that is now between the road and the rubber, right? And he has to do whatever the app does today and make it work on whatever the system that he's laying on top of, which may be Windows or SQL Server or Office if you're building on top of those kind of platforms. So now he has to make that work. If you don't have the opportunity to go back in the application and go, if we didn't write all of these reg keys and expect them to be here at this point in time, then we could do this a lot simpler. So one of the reasons I started my blog a long time ago was to try to demystify setup and then start wiring it into developers thinking about it up front and going, look, the design of my app is going to greatly affect how it gets set up. So if I do things simple from a setup point of view, it gets simpler for my app, right? So if we had a great reset, right, and took all the information back, we might be able to come up with some of these things.
Yeah.
The Mac has done a good job in, I think, reevaluating their worlds and pulling in, basically saying, your apps must be written this way now.
Yep.
I don't know how many, I don't run a Mac, I haven't run a lot, but my understanding is that old apps don't run on the new Mac.
No, well, sort of. It's sort of maybe.
Sort of maybe.
Sort of maybe.
But if you get the ability to say, we've learned everything, do it this new way, then you end up in a better place. And one of the things that we're doing here is trying to make it easier for people to move into ways that make it easier, smoother, cleaner.
Click once deployment kind of things. Right?
Well, click once is a completely different can of worms we could go into elsewhere, but it really is trying to make even apps that are what you consider more complicated, right, or actually, really functional, highly functional, really integrated with the operating system, making them even easy to use. Okay. Not always trying to drive apps towards, I just want to make it look like a web app, right? Because there's a lot of power on the machine, and if you can get on the machine and do it in a way that's safe, handling all the sharing, which is what we're trying to do here, then you get to take advantage of all that raw processing power at the same time. And we could go on and on about that kind of stuff.
Okay.
So I'm going to build again. We're going through. So I've got all of Reed's changes. I forgot to do something. Reed added the service, but I didn't pull it into the product. So I need to go back. I'm just going to abort that. And SD edit. We go into setup, FSWXS, and we'll go setup, FSWXS. So when we saw setup service, I want to point out we have two new components here.
Yeah.
One component there and one there, right? So I need to make sure that they end up inside my feature, inside that central one. Ideally, Reed would have done that, but I kind of wanted to show how we tie these things together. Now, the other thing that this is going to do is I'm going to simply create this component ref to whatever the name of that thing was, SVC component, all right? And then, oops, and also the proxy stub component. Now the other thing that this does is by me putting the references here, you'll notice that these are in different files.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have one file here that has kind of the structure of my application with the client kind of shoved in the middle because I just was lazy, dropped it in the middle. And then I have this isolated fragment here that if I need to make changes to service, it's all nice and isolated, separate, and more likely, Reed will maintain this as it goes on, or whoever does. What happens is the compiler, the Wix compiler, will compile both files into object files.
Okay.
The linker then has provided both of those object files and ties the two of them together, such that you end up with a single MSI. And so you can also add a whole bunch of other things, and if they aren't referenced at all, they just get left out because they're not part of your product.
Got it.
So you think of something the size of Office, and remember, they're going to build in 33 languages or 42 languages, how many languages they're up to, with all these different configurations of standard, pro, or whatever they name them, all the standalones. What happens is you can build all these files once, all up front, and then link them together in different configurations. Right? So now you can build many different SKUs a lot easier.
Windows is doing that, right?
Windows is doing a lot of that stuff. That's actually the team I'm working on in a different way because the operating system is built a little bit differently. But this is all these different applications. Visual Studio does this, SQL Server does this, and all these other kind of things.
Interesting.
All
Cool.
right.
So where are we?
So now that I have these two stuck together, this should create us, save the file.
So what file was that?
That was the first one that we started with. So this is our FS. This is the Fruit Server product.
Okay.
And we just keep adding components onto the end. So this product is getting bigger and bigger as we add more
Now,
functionality.
are components like DLLs, or are they something?
Components are the atomic unit of install.
Okay.
So they install things. They'll install, in our case, that proxy stub component. That's a DLL and about 10 reg keys.
Okay.
Let's build it.
All right.
Let this go ahead and build. I should have done this on my quad proc, but
All right.
my little laptop will work here. Oh. Oops. I realized I didn't uninstall the old one. So I'm going to go through my list of all the things that are installed. If I could find the Fruit Server in here. And I need to uninstall it because I haven't enabled.
Fruit Server package.
Oh, thank you. There's the GUID. You'll see that's one of those GUIDs that we use. So I'm going to tell it to uninstall the old Fruit Server. Yes, I want to uninstall it. All right. So there. And we're going to look at the new MSI.
Okay.
So you're asking what's inside a component. All right. So here's this component. You can see now we have the service component, the proxy stub component. That's good because remember they're in separate files.
Okay.
And it got linked together appropriately. If they weren't here, then we'd have a problem. All right. So if we look here, this is a foreign key to that component table. So you can see here's the SVC comes from that FS SVC component.
Yep.
All right. So and you can see each component has one file.
Yep.
That's pretty common. Let's look at the registry table. The registry table is much larger. All right. So here you go, and you can see these are split. If I make this a little bit bigger. Across two components. Here's those register keys for the service, and you can see it's like all the GUIDs and all that kind of stuff. That was the 4 lines of XML.
Got it.
Turns into all of these things. So this component has one. Each of these components has one file, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 files there, or 8 reg keys there, and 8 reg keys there.
Got it.
And those are the registry keys that are associated with that DLL.
Got it.
And because it's all declared here, now we can say, oh, this DLL and those reg keys go together. So while you look at it in regedit, or you look at your file system, you see them disparate. But the Windows installer actually sees them as together, bound together as the component.
Got
So
it.
that's how it can go, okay, all these go together, all these come off together. Oh, these guys are shared between those things, so I count them, and then I remove them and take this system back apart.
Got it.
Also, down here we see the service control, where the service component will install this service. So that has 8 reg keys, 1 file, and a service install statement. All of that turns into the server. So hopefully, this time when we go into the Fruit Server, oh, I have to install it.
These guys are IMing each other. Must be a good joke.
We'll have to ask them later. All right. So then so now hopefully this time, because you'll see we have
Stuff
this.
the camera can't catch.
Not all at the same time. You need more cameras.
Yeah.
Hopefully there, you see, we got a fruit now.
Okay.
So it didn't come back with that error. Now we're going to get fruit, and it's random whichever one comes out at this time.
Okay.
If I run it again, it likes papayas a lot. I don't know why it always comes with papaya. There's finally a mango.
I think they're making fun of you.
Yes. You have no idea.
Now they're making fun of me, actually.
All right, so now I'm going to uninstall this product and add the last thing that's actually the one that will bring us into the modern days, right? Because we have Mix coming up in not too long, right? Another couple weeks.
Yep.
So
You're going to Mix?
I am not.
You're not.
I'm apparently more important behind a keyboard. So we're going to submit this. So I made these changes to add that to the product. So check in again. All right, so I got submitted. Now read is going to, I think it's, I don't know, someone's going to check in a web service.
Okay.
So now we're going to get a whole thing, what you'd expect out of Visual Studio, most of it's generated, but it's, an ASMX file that you can then navigate and hit the get and send, post and get messages to it, and it will return you fruit at random.
Yep.
So it's a web service for giving you fruit, which is the exact same thing as that COM server,
Yep.
right? Through old RPC, and you can do all the DCOM stuff. So here it is in a web service.
Yep.
Now, of course, a web service is really interesting because you have to configure Internet Information Server.
Okay.
And hook it up into a website and create a virtual directory if you want, and an app pool, and all those other kinds of things to actually get all this block of code on the web server hosted.
Right.
So, and by the way, the Windows installer doesn't natively support installing web servers. So one of the things that Wix comes along with, besides just these tools, are these libraries of custom actions, which is what Kay mentioned in the beginning that he works on. Sorry, I call Scott Kay.
Okay.
Long history there. But the custom actions that come as blocks to do things like configure SQL, because the Windows installer doesn't support that natively. Configure IIS, so you can create websites, virtual directories, all these kinds of things.
Okay.
And you'll see how they hook into the Wix toolset.
Got it.
So if we look in, so here's the web service, and if we look at the fruit server ASMX CS file, C# with the whole web service, GUI, inherit from a web service, all that kind of stuff, which I'm not a master of. But you can see, again, get a random number inside, grab out of the fruit basket that random number.
Okay.
Okay, and then return it. And this is as a web method, right? So this is the C# code. Obviously a lot easier than all the COM stuff we wrote.
Yep.
So let's look at the setup for this thing.
Okay.
And we go back, setup, fsws.wxs. All right. This is the web service code. Not a lot less than the service code, but what we take it apart.
Right.
So the first thing we have up here is I mentioned the custom actions that we have. So we're pulling in a custom schema for the custom action. They're separate from the Wix schema.
Got it.
All comes together in the tool set. So then you say, all right, I want to use these tools. Here's the website. I'm going to put it at the default address at port 8, so it's the standard web server that it's running at.
Yep.
And I'm going to, allow it to read and run script and allow anonymous access so people can access my web service. I can configure this in all the ways that you can configure IIS. I'm going to put it into the web service directory underneath my fruit server.
Yep.
I'm going to put it in this component. There's our GUID again. Same disk. It's going to get compressed. Here's two files. Our web config file, our ASMX file.
Yep.
Typical things that you put up. We're going to, in this case, I'm going to bounce IIS, just because it's easier for the install to happen. You don't technically have to do this, but sometimes if I run this demo over and over, IIS is still running the old code or whatever, so I found it's easier to bounce it, and that's just for demo purposes. You don't have to do that.
Okay.
The next thing here is the virtual directory. So, virtual directory with all the information. It's going to be called fruit server, so I'm going to have on my machine, on my local machine, I'm going to end up with a fruit server web directory, and I'm going to have a web inside it to run all my code. So it's going to create an app inside there.
Okay.
Oh, you're popular tonight.
Yeah, hold on. I'm back here.
Sure. You ready?
So, yeah.
So then we're going to go and set the permissions on this folder. So I've set it in this case for all administrators, and also set the IIS process
Yeah.
to be able to read from this directory where I put this code. Because IIS doesn't naturally have access underneath program files.
Right.
So I'm not trying to demonstrate necessarily a good way to set up a web service. I just want to keep it all in one directory so it's easy to demo.
Yeah.
Technically speaking, you put it somewhere that was isolated and ACLed appropriately so that only the right user processes can get into and all that. For now, I'm just dumping it all underneath program files, so I have to grant access during my installation to make it work. But it does show how you can do that and create permissions. And then the last thing is I create the bin folder, which is where that side-by-side. So that's where the C# code gets compiled and put into.
Okay.
This is just the standard layout of any web service. So you do a web service, you're like, oh yeah, this is what I always do. This is how I lay it. Except a lot of people go into IIS and configure all this stuff. Well, now you can lay it out declaratively, and I need to probably, once again, just like always, edit the setup fswxs file to make sure I pull in these new components, because I've added yet again 2 more components. So I'm just going to copy this guy. This is the other thing that I forgot to mention in the beginning. Wix is all text file based, so you get all the power of whatever editors you use. It also get, as you see, we're doing all the diffing and seeing how the changes come in and come out and all that kind of stuff. So it fits right into the way developers write code, which is different than having to back out or get into like like a UI or something and have to hook through everything and stuff like that. You get directly down to code. Some people prefer UIs, some people prefer the code. This is where we're at.
Yep.
And I need to add these 2 components. The FS web service component. So we'll jump back to the other guy, and we'll add him at the end. And we'll copy him. I think the other guy's called bin. Component FS bin component. Yep. This is the guy that actually has the code. The rest of it's all just configuration. All right. So we save that. We're done with this one.
What are you guys joking about in there now?
Let me put up Scott some more.
It is a pastime sometimes.
So what are you guys working on while we're getting the demo?
Huh?
What are you guys?
Work.
I see. This is 20% time. Okay.
Oh, it is all fun. This is
We're testing Messenger.
Yeah.
It's like work.
It's got a few bugs. We want a feature.
We won't be able to kick K, but
all right. So now we're going
I
to.
kicked myself.
hey, if the Messenger team's watching, that was worth getting in.
They use Wix. It's all right. All right. So now we're going to install this, and in the end, we're going to see. Well, as always, we're going to see more stuff show up, and it's a little slower this time because we're talking IIS. We're getting configured. We're stopping it and starting it.
Yeah.
Not horribly slow. 'Cause it's already done. But and if we look inside the fruit server here, we'll see. Hey, look, a web service. Right, and then you see our bin directory. So this is exactly how we laid it out before.
Yeah.
So now the real test is HTTP key, localhost. So I'm going to connect to this local machine. You can see I've done this a few times from previous installs. I'll uninstall and show that it really, when I uninstall, it's not there.
Yeah.
So what we hope comes up is that when I hit enter, Internet Explorer come up and will show me IS starting, getting the code all loaded, and returns me a web service. So this is the default rendering of a web service on, I don't know, probably ASP.1.1.
Right.
So then when I call the get method, you can see here's it says how it's going to give us a SOAP and all that kind of stuff. When I hit invoke, it opens a window, calls get, and returns me a random fruit.
Excellent.
So you can see it's just, I try to, no smoke and mirrors all the way through. You can see everything, how it all works. And so now, just to prove that I didn't have this working before I did the install, this is the uninstall. Running website found, no application.
Yep.
So it's gone. One last thing before I completely bore you. Let's do it.
You have about 10 more minutes on tape.
All right. Well, we'll fit this in, no problem. All right. So.
So what are you doing now?
I submitted that change so that Reed can give me the last set of changes. So all this stuff you see in this little standard UI dialog pop up, and there's no text and so not many people, their installs are that, no UI at all. So inside Wix, we provide you not only the compiler and linker and the set of custom actions to configure things like IIS and SQL and that kind of stuff, we also provide a standard UI. So when I sync, I think Reed's provided the logic, right? So what's this change? 6125?
Yeah.
If we look at this change, he's added a license.rtf, so we're going to add a license text, standard EULA kind of thing that every package has. We'll see ours in a minute. We're going to see that we copy it into the location. But here's the interesting thing. We add a loc file, because we have all these localizations, so we're going to start having strings in UI, so you want to have a loc file that pulls all that in. And then all we do is we're pulling the UI lib, which will be, these are lib files, just like C++ has lib files and how you link to them and they'll pull in functionality and maybe hook you to other DLLs and things like that.
Right.
This is the same thing. This is a block of already compiled code from Wix that you just hook into your product and you'll get whatever it provides you. In our case, it's going to provide us UI. The only thing I have to do, again, like always, is go into my root product and set up fs.wxs, and I don't know, put at the end, add a UI ref to ID equals Wix UI underscore Mondo. This is the UI with all the bells and whistles in it.
Okay.
So that's it. Add that link line, so we're going to pull that Wix lib in with all the functionality, and then hook into it. We have 4 or 5 different standard templates that you, or wizard sequences that you can work through.
Okay.
So if I spelt that correctly, one more time to build, and this is the process, right? Or you can see, check in, edit a little more code, build. Check in, edit a little more code, build. Check in, edit a little more code, build. That's over and over. Nightly builds, put on a build server, build overnight, all this kind of stuff. We have, for example, in Wix, tasks also is for MS Build and for Nant. So if you use those kind of processes, we already have the standard plugins into those systems so that you can just use all the Wix tools. All right, so there it is. So now if this worked, if I got the right thing and we install, we're going to see our install come up with UI. So we can just step through it, you know. This is where our license would go if we had one, accept the terms, go through that. We can go through custom. You see we have one feature.
Yep.
I could add more features if I wanted. This would automatically change, do all that kind of stuff. Again, you can, you know.
Ah, so that's where the features get surfaced.
Exactly. So before we've been doing no UI, so they've all just been getting installed. Now you can see the features. And I can go back in the code and add another feature. So you can see now I could go, all right, here's the client, here's the server, and here's the web server, separate features. You want to see that?
Is Excel considered a feature then?
Yeah, inside Office.
Yeah. Got it. Okay.
So, and that's it. Bob did most of the work, so for all these custom actions. So,
Very cool.
and if you know any good graphic artists, we're looking for people. I mean,
Please.
I know a few.
so I mean, we're
Come
looking
out
for
on
people
Channel 9. Jamie on Channel 9. Say hi to Jamie on Channel 9.
We're looking for some people that want to do it.
You want to pause that for a second?
Oh yeah,
Oh,
pizza.
sure.
Pizza guy.
Sure. Almost. So that was the end?
That was the end. Unless you want to try to end it.
Oh.
I mean, it's.
Oh, pizza's almost here, so you
Right.
get 1 more minute.
That's it, right? So I'm just going to redo my. If you know graphic artists that are willing to comp us some graphics, we would appreciate those. You can
Okay.
plug in the graphics. That lib, there's a way of going in and changing the bitmaps that show up. So if you want to brand it yourself, the documentation shows how to do that. But
Okay.
I would really like if we had standard UI inside the Wix. It just goes, it looks cool, but it doesn't have any Wix stuff. It just looks cool. So everybody that wants a UI that doesn't have a graphic artist gets at least a nice UI.
Got it.
So anyway,
Well, cool. Thanks for spending an hour with me.
yeah.
So, thanks. And
Pleasure.
thanks, everybody, for doing this. This is great stuff.
Yeah.
Thanks.